And while, yes, there could be a democratic vision for Europe of a real republic of republics of the European continent. I refuse to actually give it that, not, but whatever. The that could exist, but it does not exist. And the reason why it doesn't exist is economic, because there's no way you're going to get agreement of all those zones to do the neoliberal integrationist policy that the EU has done since the end of the Bretton Woods system, effectively. So, and they know that. I mean, like, that's the elephant in the room. Like, that's why the EU made sure no member state could have currency sovereignty, including Germany, even though I'm going to be somewhat offensive here, but I've always viewed the EU as like the backdoor mixture of the French Empire and the Fourth Reich. Like, it is what it is in this scenario. So, I'd like to hear Kuba respond to me as a slightly more sanguine Europe person than me.
I was just smiling while you were saying that, because you say sovereignty the way that Michael Brooks always used to. But anyway, go on, Kuba.
So, first of all, the fact that the EU has established an effective structure for 3 generations of peace in the core of Europe is something that I think a lot of critics of the EU completely allied. Right, that is a massive achievement. There hasn't been Franco-German conflict. That there hasn't been even like a scramble for Iberia, or the militarization of Italy, or even the Yugoslav wars were relatively contained and managed. And we got to climb down from the troubles in Ireland. That was only possible thanks to the particular structures of the EU. And the real uplift of material economic reality for hundreds of millions of Europeans, not just Easterners like myself, Southerners, Portuguese, Spaniards, Greeks before they fucked it up, Irish, right? The level of material well-being and prosperity, which cannot be reduced to they got in on some extractive neo-colonial exploitation of Africa, because a lot of it comes out of productivity gains within the core, technological development, and technological deployment within the core of Europe, not relations between Europe and the global South. All of these are monumental achievements that have saved and improved hundreds and millions of lives. So if we're going to shit all over the EU, that's part of what you're shitting on.
I'm okay with that, because I don't think that will last very long. And I think it has been oncoming for the last 10 years anyway.
It's possible. And I mean, our civilization may not last for very much longer. And that said, right, like, you might miss it when it's over. If there is, and to a certain extent, right, like, the way in which the European Union and these continental institutions have foreclosed the possibility of, which I think is a rather fanciful one, of some kind of leftist breakthrough in, I don't know, Catalonia, Denmark, right? Like the Italian cantons of Switzerland. I'm not sure where these vibrant local, national level leftist experiments that the EU is theoretically crib-deathed were supposed to happen. But the extent to which they've been prevented also goes hand in hand with the existence of a centralized node, right? Like, within Brussels and a bureaucratic structure, which could be where you get a continental breakthrough towards a leftist reorganization of European society and politics. Right?
I have a question
and
on
then
that
you wouldn't
regard.
need to go canton by canton.
What about, is there any basis to an explanation the spread of right reactionary politics within member states of the European Union that has to do with economic integrationism?
There are accounts, yes, that you get revanchism because of the dismantling of the social democratic structures of you name it, France or Scandinavia or Germany, creating a greater sense of precariousness and a feeling of relative privation that then opens up things to the far right. That's possible. One must ask why it favors so heavily the far right over the far left. And there are cases such as Poland or Hungary where you have the nationalist revanchism under conditions of social democratic improvement and general prosperity, which kind of falsifies the narrative that the neoliberal integration forced by the EU is the thing that's driving the move to the right, because the social democratic prosperity also forced by the EU apparently has the same effect, which unfortunately makes the sort of Rod Dreher-ist this is a reaction to, globo homo style forced cosmopolitan liberalization seem a little bit more persuasive as an explanatory vehicle.
Well, let's just
which gets you to
for a moment, right? Because it's like it does seem like I don't want to be too say okay. So I think the second point is stronger than the first, but on the first point, why would it favor the far right? I think there is like other stuff that's happened in the last several decades that might make it hard for the left to pick out benefits from this. I think certainly the fall of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc and the sort of demise of the place that the sort of most fervent hopes for socialism had been invested in. Certainly the fact that even like old social democratic parties that that might have otherwise benefited from this have politically repositioned themselves by then in ways that made it very difficult for them to benefit on this, that were in some cases, and I don't want to exaggerate, you have to look at this country by country, but like in some cases where we're actually the agents of neoliberalization, so that made it harder for them to, that made it less likely that they would benefit from it. I do think there are maybe some I think there might be some reasons why.
And I also would add to that, I think there might be some other reasons why there's been peace in Europe, aka the fucking nuclear bomb. So just to throw that out there, it's the establishment of this to the productivity of the core, which is fascinating to me as a socialist argument, because not to impugn your social democratic virtues, but
the bad's coming. What's up?
That has been done largely by foreclosing experimentation and limiting how that social democracy can be administered and run its own monetary policy, and that has been shut off even from the EU's own parliament by its constitution. So the fact that it would favor the right as a result of that is pretty fucking obvious. Nonetheless, it did not help that the people who sold this were largely of social democratic parties from Mitterrand forward. And its association as a result of kind of the Keynesian internationalism of the World War II agreements really does put the center left in a kind of bind in regards to larger Europe. It's been able to weather it in places that already had a fairly strong center left tradition, i.e. the Scandinavian countries, but places that have not really developed them in any real sense. I mean, they haven't been able to really do anything. They're immediately discredited and voted out of office the moment they try anything.
Well, I mean, consider Spain. I would challenge that. Spain has tended to have currently has a center-left coalition, I think. And
no, I think they just chose like a new not center-right, far-right leader.
Yeah,
the king just
did
mandate to create a government. Yeah.
Well, Portugal then.
Portugal is you got me on Portugal.
Yeah,
Portugal's the case in point. It's and on one hand, it's hard for me. The problem that I have with this is hard for me to see this. Like, let's just create a counterfactual for a second and say that Germany's defeated. You don't have a unified Eurozone. You have kind of two options that could develop out of that. You can have a global nuclear war. You would have had treaties of cooperation emerge anyway, and probably overseen by either the Soviet Union or the United States, regardless, right? So, I mean, in some ways, something like the EU after the results of World War II are almost inevitable. But
well, I mean, we've got both cases because you had the EU, but you also had Comic-Con. And there's a reason we don't talk about Comic-Con.
It took me a second to realize you were talking not about the event in San Diego, but the Soviet-led economic.
It was bound to be LARPing and cosplay, actually, before. Of course.
It's like, those seem like really weird points of comparison, but okay.
Yeah, precisely, right? Like the very fact that one could make that confusion and be mistaken like that, right, proves my point. Yeah. We tried the Soviet socialist style European integration, and it sucked. It sucked for everyone, especially the people who were being integrated. The strongest case for the EU was made in Eastern Europe by the experience of Soviet socialism. And Ben, you're absolutely right that like the association of leftist parties with the Soviet project has been absolutely toxic for leftist efforts in Europe. And that's something that needs to be reckoned with, right? Like, I think it's fine to have a, sentimental, tragic, romantic attachment to the Soviet Union as a glorious but ultimately failed experiment. But an unwillingness to let go of its rotting, zombified, putrid flesh and seek for a new model for a leftist Europe, right?
Well,
a new blueprint.
And I suspect, actually, as that sentence ended, that this might be intentional. This is as beautiful a transition as I'm likely to get. That I've been teasing this for a while, but we finally nailed things down with the venue. Bhaskar Sankara and I and our friend, the Australian economist Mike Beggs, are writing a book for Verso called The Blueprint about what a sort of feasible and economically viable version of socialism might look like. having, learned what we take to be some of those lessons from the Soviet Union. And our first event, it's not anywhere near coming out yet, but to sort of preview it, is going to be in Chicago on Labor Day. I kind of hate that title because I think the answer really all straightforward to give is no, but forget that. The content.
Good. The answer to that is
Can
no.
lead socialism co-ops work across too?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But forget that part. That's I complained about it, and I was told we could clarify that all at the beginning. And anyway, the answers to most questions and titles is no anyway. So, but talk about co-ops, talk about planning, talk about models of post-capitalist society. So that's Labor Day. So that's Monday, September 4th at the Hideout in Chicago. So if you are in Chicago or near Chicago and you want to come see Bhaskar and Mike and I and nerd out about all that, that is 7 p.m. on Labor Day. And as to the putrid, rotting flesh of the Soviet experience and the respects in which, as fatally flawed as that model may have been, the death of it might have been a tragedy nonetheless, and what all that says about the EU and what the left should think about the EU. As fascinating as this has been to watch play out here, like a sort of leftist version of the 1999 Hitchens versus Hitchens debate on whether Britain should
Which
be...
one of us is Peter and which one of us is Christopher is the question. But
You're Peter, Kuba's Christopher.
You're Peter.
I don't think I'm
Thank you.
confused about this. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.